How you doing, folks? Welcome back to another episode of Hot Takes with your host, Marcus. And today we have a lot to get into today. Now, a lot has happened in the past week. As a matter of fact, a lot has happened tonight, but we'll get to that in just a second. First and foremost, I do want to say this first off. The great Serena Williams has been contemplating retirement. There's no official word on whether she actually will or not, but just say her accomplishments in the sport of tennis are unparalleled, male, female, what have you. When you think of tennis, just the sport itself, you think Serena Williams. It's not even close. How many Grand Slams, how many times she's won Wimbledon. She is, I put it to you this way. People have a tendency to talk about the GOAT, greatest of all time. In certain sports, there's no such thing as the greatest of all time. But in this case, it's going to be a long time before we think of anyone else other than Serena Williams when it comes to the game of tennis. The same way for a long time we all thought about Tiger Woods, which, by the way, prayers up for Tiger Woods. He was in a terrible car accident, and while he is not seriously injured, as far as being life-threatening, he did take multiple leg injuries. My prayers are with him. That he gets well soon, not just for his sport, but just for his family's sake and just for his well-being. But when we talk about the greatest of all time, someone's name needs to come to mind. Now, I'll have another episode for this at another time, but just keep in mind that when we're talking about the greatest of all time, when it comes to team sports, I'm not sure you can ever say that there's a greatest of all time. I think that you can say there's the greatest of an era, greatest at a position, but as far as greatest of all time, when you take that word all time into account, I think you have to think about the fact that the game is still currently being played and we don't know who's to come. So I'll get into that a little later as well, and probably have an entire episode dedicated to the greatest of all time subject. Tonight I want to talk about basketball because it is, after all, it's basketball season, and I'm a little perturbed right now. I know I've talked about the Brooklyn Nets at length before, and that's because I am big time on role players and defense. And I thought maybe the Brooklyn Nets finally got it together. Just last week they made the signings of Iman Shumpert, an NBA veteran who is not known for offense but is known mostly for his defense. And also, they acquired Andre Roberson, the former Oklahoma City Thunder guard who could not shoot to save his life. I'm talking about couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, not a free throw, not a nothing. But defensively, the man was great, and he still is. Now, these are both two very, very savvy veterans. And they've only been on the team for roughly a week, and tonight they were released or waived in this situation so that they didn't have to have guaranteed contracts with the Brooklyn Nets. They also let go of Noah Vonleh, but that's neither here nor there because he really didn't play much for part offensively or defensively. Noah Vonleh is a bit of an anomaly. He's one of those players who had potential, just never lived up to it, and just kind of fell off for the most part. So he's here and there every now and again. I doubt we'll be seeing him anymore, at least this season. But they let two very good defenders at the guard position and wing position go because even though they're the best team in the East offensively, I will say this as many times, I will scream it to the heavens. Any and every team that has ever played in a championship situation or won a championship had to play defense. And it seems like Mike D'Antoni and Steve Nash don't seem to understand that. Now, I do understand that they made these roster spots open because we have Andre Drummond from Cleveland on the verge of a buyout, which is going to allow him to get the majority of his money for this year, meaning he can go to any team he wants to, namely a contender like Brooklyn, and he can get, all of his money from Cleveland and play for league minimum. It'll cost the Nets next to nothing to sign him on a one-year deal for the remainder of the season. And that's good for them. That's really good control of the cap. My thing is, you cleared out 3 spots to pick up one player. Now, if they're smart, like I hope they are, what they're doing is they're also dodging having to guarantee any contracts coming up on the deadline. So if they were to do this and being smart about it, like I hope they are being, they're going to open up these 3 roster spots. They're going to bring in a 10-day contract player, and that player is not going to be on the roster going forward. He's just here for 10 days to fill the roster, to make sure they have enough players traveling while they wait for the deadline and wait for these players to come loose. I think what they're going to do is they're going to pick up Andre Drummond as soon as he gets his buyout. That's going to guarantee his staying with them for the remainder of that season. So he'll be the only guaranteed contract they pick up on a veteran minimum. Then they're going to have 2 spots left, and I think they'll bring back Roberson and Iman Shumpert. And now they won't have guaranteed contracts, but they'll have league minimum contracts that they'll get the rest of that, the rest of the year in. Whether they play or not isn't really the point. But to my point, as far as defense is concerned, Andre Drummond is going to anchor that defense from the center position. You bring back Roberson and Shumpert. Now you have a defensive guard, a defensive wing, and a defensive stopper in the paint, as well as all that firepower you have in the big 3 of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. I'm hoping I'm right about that. But given that they have Mike D'Antoni as an assistant coach to Steve Nash as head coach, I'm not holding my breath. I really am not holding my breath. I want to believe that's what they're doing. There's no proof of it, but I'm hoping that someone in that organization is smart enough to make that type of move, because it's the only way they're going to win a championship. Because Iman Shumpert and Andre Roberson are going to be pivotal pieces. The same way last year, everyone complained about the Los Angeles Lakers picking up Jared Dudley instead of picking up a more impactful player, but he was just what they needed. The Lakers needed defense last year that went outside of Anthony Davis. Well, they got Jared Dudley. He was a motivator. He played great defense. They brought on Markieff Morris. They brought all the right kind of pieces in. Sometimes you need guys who just need to do a specific job. I thought we learned this way back watching the 76ers in the Allen Iverson days. No one else on that team could score because Allen Iverson could put out that kind of, put those kind of points up. And then the second in command at scoring was Rajah Bell, who got maybe 15 to 20 minutes a game just spelling, Iverson or, stepping in for Aaron McKee. But everyone else on that team was there to play defense. They did everything that Iverson could not do. And that's how Larry Brown built that team. I thought that, I'm hoping that that's what's happening in Brooklyn right now. The same way they do it all over the league. You have players who are great at one thing and they have a team built to do whatever that player doesn't do, to compensate for that. That's what was happening in Houston with James Harden all those years. All he played was offense. He played no defense. So that's why you had PJ Tucker. That's why you had a Patrick Beverly for a while. That's why they brought in Chris Paul, because Chris Paul plays both sides of the ball. This is why they had Trevor Ariza. They kept players who actually play defense rotating around this guy who doesn't play any defense. And so far, it would appear that the Brooklyn Nets have these 3 offensive players, only one of which plays consistent defense, being Kevin Durant, and 2 of which are capable of defense but refuse to play any, honestly. So at this point, they put together a decent amount of talent. But they're going to have to get that defense back if they're going to win the championship. Given that the East really can't compete with the Nets' firepower on offense, it doesn't make any sense for them to lack on defense the way that they do. So I'm really hoping that that's what they're doing. They're just going to pick up Andre Drummond and then re-sign these other 2 players to make sure that they can go, because, like I said, come playoff time, it's going to be pivotal that they actually have defenders, because the playoffs is a completely different animal. Speaking of role players, I'm loving what I'm seeing from the Washington Wizards of late. They went on a small winning streak here. They've been doing a lot of losing lately. I mean, not saying that I expect them to do a lot of winning in the first place, but I mean, that franchise has been in flux for a few years. I think what has happened now, they did take a loss after a little winning streak. I think they had like a 4 or 5 game winning streak, and they just took a loss to kind of end that streak. But prior to that loss, I think something important happened, and it's really good. Some players were they weren't aware of what their actual position on the team was, what they were there to do. And this is why I say it's the best thing you could ever do is know your role on the team and be a star in that role. Some of the best players of all time go unknown because they weren't the star of the team, but they were a star in their role. Perfect example, I think I gave it last time, Robert Horry. Robert Horry was never the star of his team. But when his number was called, Big Shot Bob took it and made it 9 times out of 10. Back to that whole thing I said earlier about the greatest of all time. Specifically in basketball, whenever we say greatest of all time, the first name that pops up for some reason, and not in my head, but for most people, is Michael Jordan. Now, despite what I may think of Michael Jordan as a person, that's a whole nother story, a whole nother can of worms to be opened up for a later date. But when I think best of all time, I think until the game of basketball is no longer played professionally, we won't ever know who the best of all time is. Right now, we know who the best of each and every era is to this point. Well, at least for, I guess, if you want to, I mean, if, you know, as far as things being recorded. I mean, because in my opinion, the best player of all time, if we're counting championships, it's Bill Russell. If we're talking about consistency, I guess you could throw Michael Jordan in there too, but Bill Russell is still right there. Points scored, okay, it's still Kareem Abdul-Jabbar until LeBron takes it the next year or two. It's, you know, who's the most competitive? Undoubtedly, in my mind, that's Kobe Bryant. You know, there are so many aspects to that, who the greatest of all time is, that it's really hard to come up with a definitive answer. Again, if you're counting rings, Bill Russell got 12 to Michael Jordan's 6. I mean, again, consistency, being great all the time. I got to throw LeBron James in there because he's made it to the finals, 10 times? 10 times, and he's won it, 4 times now with 3 different franchises? I mean, that's impressive in itself. So when you talk about the greatest of all time, the word all time really does stick out there. But what happened in Washington is Russell Westbrook made a declaration to the team. He went to each and every player and made them say out loud to to each other, what is your role? Define your role. Some fans aren't happy about it because what followed was a loss. But it's important that these players know their role on the team. There's nothing worse than a bunch of guys who think that they're the guy. While I love that confidence, it's great to have said confidence, it does you no good if no one knows what their purpose is on that team. You know, another example of being a star in your role is one of my favorite players of all time, Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman was not known for having scoring outbursts. He was known for hustle. He was known for being the guy who did the dirty work. Bill Laimbeer did the dirty work. These guys could make shots when they needed to, but that wasn't their primary objective. Rebounds, being the enforcer, being a gnat on defense, getting in your opponent's head. Another one of my favorite players of all time. He wasn't the best player on the team. He was among them, but he wasn't the best. Gary Payton, the glove. He was all in your ear the whole game. He let you know he was going to be there. One of my current favorite players is Patrick Beverley. He embodies everything that Gary Payton was about. I love Jimmy Butler as well. My Miami Heat. Defense. He's a leader. He's not always going to lead you to a victory with his points and his production that way, but he galvanizes the guys. He gets them going. Everyone's got a role to play. So who's the leader? Who's the star? Who's the rebounder? What's your role? Define it and be a star in it. And I absolutely love it. You can apply that to life in general. But this is a sports show. We're going to stick to sports. So I love the fact that happened. And this is the part of Russell Westbrook's personality that I wish was spoken about more often. Russell Westbrook is usually seen as some sort of demonstrative figure on the court. He's seen as, a borderline being a cancer to his teammates because he seems to alienate himself from everyone else. He's an alpha dog in the locker room, but he also leads his team in more than one way, in ways that you don't see, which is why I'm glad that report came out. And Bradley Beal stepped up and said, it was a really important moment for everybody, and I think that we need to talk more about that. Personally, I think that Russell Westbrook one day is going to be a great coach. I think he'll be a coach one day because players can get behind him. He's passionate about the game. Now, I think he'll be a great coach one day. I hope he becomes a coach one day, but right now it looks like he's going to go into becoming a fashionista, which is a little subjective if you know anything about Russell Westbrook and his choice of runway outfits pre-games for the NBA. It's a little out there, to say the least. what I have here in front of me, give me 1 second. I'm going to make it clear to you guys right now. We are going into the All-Star voting situation. Well, actually, the All-Star voting is over, actually. So we have the Eastern and Western players from each conference who have been selected to be the starters and to be the reserves. Now, there are some players here that, quite frankly, everyone deserves to be in the All-Star game, but I have an easy chance just showing it to you. Okay, here you go. Okay, so these are the All-Stars for both East and West. Of course, you got your Kevin Durant, your LeBron James, Stephen Curry, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Luka Doncic, the usual suspects. Now, here's my problem with this, and I know it sounds strange that I would have a problem with this, given that these are the best players in the league. Most of these players don't care about making the All-Star team because they've done it so many times already. LeBron James, he's a 17-time All-Star. Kevin Durant, 11 times. Certain players don't care about it. They've been there so many different times. And to be quite frank with you, it's not something that they work for anymore. Because at this point, All-Star voting has become more so who's the biggest name in the game. It's not about their production. It's not about how they've picked themselves up from the previous season. It's not about their progression anymore. It's about popularity. And I think that if you take popularity out of it, there should always be at least 4 players in the All-Star game who have never made it before because they've elevated themselves from one level to the next. And now they're in that stratosphere. So the players who made the team this year, a few of them absolutely deserved it in their first-time All-Stars. I was going to be livid because everyone got a chance to vote this year, fans included, and the people that I vote in usually are players who have earned it. They've taken a huge step up, and I feel like they're players who just should not be there based on the fact that they're just names at this point. Okay, so first-time All-Stars in the East. I am so proud. I'm happy to say that Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics, he stepped up big time this year for that team, and he finally made the All-Star team. Had he not made it, I would have been so disappointed because he truly deserves it. Another player is Julius Randle of the New York Knicks, a player that I never thought was going to make the All-Star team because I know the potential was there back when he played for the Lakers, but it just didn't seem to really click until he got to New York, and this year is when it really started to show. I mean, we saw flashes last year, but he really plays at an All-Star level this year, and he truly deserves it. Another player, so we go over to the West. Okay, so this right here is one that's a little controversial to me. I don't feel like Zion Williamson should be an All-Star yet. I understand technically this is his second season. He didn't play a whole lot in his first season due to injury and attrition and COVID and all that good stuff. I mean, I understand, things happen, but, I think that there could have been other players in this situation. Like, personally, I spoke about him in another episode. Christian Wood, went from being, I think he was either second round or undrafted, bounced from team to team, cut multiple times, bounced around in the G League for a while, was signed to other teams and cut the next day to make the Detroit Pistons lineup in the East last year show out, make it to the Houston Rockets this year, sign a $40 million contract. That's a big contract for someone who didn't even get drafted and bounced the way he did. And he is almost averaging a double-double this year. He's gone from being barely on anyone's roster in a matter of literally 2 calendar years, from barely making the roster to being a starter and a key component to his team. He is truly deserving of an All-Star vote. At this point, I feel like Zion Williamson, while he is a terrific player, he's box office. That's the problem. He's box office. Everybody and their mama know who Zion Williamson is. Based on what he did in college, based on what he did in high school. It's only his second year, and while he is playing great, I'll say it again, he is playing great. I don't think it's his time to be the All-Star just yet. Another player that probably should be here, that probably isn't gonna, be here. I mean, here's the thing: if you're gonna go by names, and you got Zion in, where's Ja Morant? I mean, apparently this isn't about whether you have a winning record or how, are you able to pull your team. This is about big names. Ja Morant should be here. Another player that should really be here, and going back to the East, I talked about Detroit a moment ago. A player who's bounced around the league for a little while now, from Indiana to New Orleans. He's gone everywhere. He's played for practically almost half the teams in the league. At least it seems that way, and, Oklahoma City included. Is Jeremy Grant. He plays for Detroit right now. Jeremy Grant legitimately has made a name for himself now. He is the star of that team. Whether they're playing meaningful basketball or not, it doesn't really matter at this point. This man has gone to Detroit and shown the league that he is ready to take that next step, and he's taking it in Detroit. And he should be at least a reserve on this team, because I don't think Anthony Davis is going to be playing in this year's All-Star game because he's currently injured. Another player that I feel like really should have been at least considered is De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento. He's playing ball out of his mind and is not getting recognized for it. Obviously, he plays in Sacramento and he don't get a lot of press, but that shouldn't matter. I mean, for goodness sakes, as great as Damian Lillard is, he should have been starting over Luka Doncic this year. He plays in a small market over there in Portland, Oregon. He's a reserve. He's a six-time All-Star, but he should have been starting. I mean, there are just certain players who I believe got snubbed in a bad way. Chris Paul's on his list. He's an 11-time All-Star. Not saying that Chris Paul isn't having a great year, but another player, two players that could have been in this year, and I don't understand why they're not. Chris Paul's teammate, Devin Booker, who has been snubbed for the last 3 to 4 years, which makes no sense at all. He's literally the heir apparent to Kobe Bryant. I don't understand. Like, the guy puts up 60-point performances. Last year in the bubble, he and the Phoenix Suns went 8-0. They should have been in the playoffs, but they went 8-0 just to get bounced out because I don't even know how the rule worked. It made no sense. But that's neither here nor there. He got snubbed again this year. Another year, Devin Booker's not there. I don't understand that. Another player is there's just so many guys who just I feel like need to be recognized. I mean, I guess my point is that being an All-Star shouldn't be, I'm famous and everyone knows my name. Like, another first-time All-Star this year, I'm glad he finally made it, is Zach LaVine in Chicago. He really should have made it 2 years ago, but we're not going to talk about that because, they're saying, he's doing such a great job this year. He's been doing a great job for 3 years now. Ever since he became, like, the guy, he's taken that step, and he's done everything he can to make the All-Star team. This man refused to even participate in any of the events at All-Star Weekend until he made the All-Star team. So now he's made the All-Star team. I'm glad he's there. There are just so many players. I feel like there should be at least 4 spots every year for new players to be made into All-Stars. They need to take that step and they move forward. There are so many players who got snubbed this year. The list goes on and on. Like, players who I think did not need to be an All-Star game this year. It's going to sound crazy. LeBron James, who doesn't even want to be there. He doesn't want to play in the All-Star. Another player who doesn't want it. Kawhi Leonard does not want to be there. Kyrie Irving does not want to be there. Giannis does not want to be there. I don't know about Stephen Curry because he's mum on the whole situation. But these are players who don't necessarily care about this accolade. And yes, it should be considered an accolade. It should not be something you get just because you have a name. You should be earning these things. At this point, they're just being given to them because, he's been the face of this franchise for X amount of time. He's won this many rings. It's unfair to those who work their behinds off just to make rosters to take that step and then still get snubbed. It's not fair. But that's the league that we have right now. We got to work with it. I know it seems like I've just been sitting here ranting about it, but it does burn me up just a little bit. I mean, it does get to me in kind of a serious way. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me for it to really go on this way. So, with those being the main focuses of this episode here, I know there's supposed to be a hot take every single week. And I'm not sure I have a really strong one this time around. So what I will say is this. Going forward, and I really hope this happens, the same way that I said that my last hot take was that the NBA is going to adopt this new formula for the All-Star weekend and making it, a one-day event where you have the skills competition and the three-point contest before the game. Then at halftime you have the dunk contest, and then you finish the game. I think they're going to adapt to that because that seems pretty cool, and and the players still get a week off to reset. But something that's being overlooked here is what I just said. I think that, Commissioner Adam Silver is going to notice, because this isn't just something that I've been thinking. A lot of players get snubbed every year for this All-Star thing. I think it's time to start recognizing these players who are taking these giant strides and recognize those players for what they've done. So going forward, the hot take for this week is soon, and I'm saying in the next 2 seasons at the very least, they're going to have 2 reserve roles for each side, East and West, for new All-Stars. Because let's face it, on the ballot this year, Klay Thompson was on the ballot. Klay Thompson hasn't played basketball since last year. And let the fans vote them in, the casual fans. He would have been an All-Star sitting in a suit broadcasting Warriors games this year. Hadn't played a single game, a single minute. Hadn't even laced them up this year. He hasn't been able to. Other players, I know I'm going backwards, but other players that really deserved it, Pascal Siakam in Toronto. He's been doing his best to carry that team out there. I mean, there's all kinds of players who deserve recognition, and they're just not getting it. It doesn't make any sense to me, but hey, it is what it is. So yes, again, the hot take is, going forward, there will be 4 slots in all. 4 slots. 2 for each side, East and West, every year, so that we can, give these players their due. Because they truly are giving everything they got, and they're just going unnoticed. So, with that being said, thank you for watching this episode of Hot Takes. Until next time, I've been your host, Marcus. Peace.